Good day everyone and welcome to my MagSorc PvP build and gameplay video for update 35 Lost Depths. As some of you may already know, MagSorc right now is in a pretty weak position when it comes to PvP. It's very difficult to perform well when compared to the other classes. And that means that it is important to get a really good build at your side when you do decide to play this class and enter PvP. It also means that your options are rather limited now, which is why instead of making a guide with multiple builds, I just have a singular build to showcase, just a general build for MagSorc and some gameplay afterwards to show how it plays. I did try a bunch of other builds the past week, however I found none of them to perform that well compared to this simple build I'm about to show. And that's why I'm not sharing them in this video. However, I do plan to make another video about MagSorc, more specifically on how it performs in PvP, why it is so bad, and also share some of the other ideas that I have, maybe with build editor links as well, in case that you're looking for more inspiration to go ahead and make your own MagSorc build if you feel like trying it out. So with that out of the way, let me just mention that the build can also be found on my website, esopvpbuilds.com. And if you have any questions, you can also feel free to join the Discord server. I'm very active there and you can ask me questions about this build or MagSorc. Now, for the build itself, I am, as race, still a High Elf. Breton will do as well, Dark Elf too. All points into maximum magicka. As you can see, this is a classic shield setup for MagSorc. I don't really advise going with no shield anymore because it's been nerfed quite significantly when it comes to survivability, and damage also is not as high anymore. So that's why I like to have a shield setup. This will make me the tankiest these days, which is still relatively speaking not very tanky, but for MagSorc there's nothing more you can do really. So I'm running Death Dealer's Feet, so when that is procced I'll have about 30k health and 50k magicka, which is quite perfect to have a tanky build. And then the damage will be alright as well, but it is going to be important to have Overload up. So let me just immediately mention that as an ultimate, the main ult I use is Overload, and the damage that this deals in comparison to normal light attacks is quite big. And I noticed that with this build I'm not dealing much damage when Overload is down, but when Overload is up the damage is alright. So for the gear sets, I have 5 pieces of Crafty Elfique in combination with 1 piece Trainee, 2 pieces of Mighty Tudun, and then 3 pieces of Ancient Grace with the Death Dealer's Feet mythic as mentioned. All the traits are impenetrable. You can, if you want to have some well fitted as well, but generally it's important to have a decent amount of impenetrable because that's the only source of critical resistance in this build, and otherwise there's a lot of critical damage going around. You will be squishy nonetheless. For the jewelry traits I have 3 Arcane, and for the weapon traits I have Defending on the back bar with Charged on the front bar. Now let me maybe start with the traits here on the weapons. The Defending back bar is combined with an Escapist poison as well here, that gives 4.4 seconds of immovability. Quite important to get in my opinion, even though it's just a little poison, but it does help me a lot with casting Dark Conversion and all that. After all, when you are immovable, Dark Conversion cannot be interrupted. So on the front bar the trait is Charged with a poison glyph. Sharpened is also a good option, but I like Charged for 2 reasons. First of all, it allows me to proc status effects a lot, which means quite a big damage increase from the little dot from poison damage, but also the dot from fire damage, which comes from Crushing Shock, as well as minor vulnerability, which also comes from Crushing Shock, and then a little bit of damage as well from the frost damage status effect procs. And then this lowers the penetration a bit, of course, since you don't have Sharpened, but there's a CP, which is called Force of Nature, and if you put that on, you will gain part of that penetration back. Of course, this CP is a bit nerfed compared to previous patch, but it is still a good CP to slot nonetheless, when you are able to proc a decent amounts of stats effects, in this case 5. So for the jewelry enchants I have 2 try enchants here to get a decent amount of stamina regeneration and 1 magic regen enchant. This match you don't need as much magic regeneration on MagSorc as previously, not even on shield builds. This is because Dark Conversion got a bit of a buff where it now gives back more resources. It also costs more stamina, so it's important to keep a somewhat decent level of stamina sustain as well. However, on this build this is basically the only need I have for stamina sustain. This is a really classic MagSorc build, and honestly it's been the most fun for me as well, next to being decently effective compared to other builds too, to the point where this is the build I'm sticking with personally. So this dark version is the only source of stamina, basically, that you need to that you will consume. Of course, this allows you to do quite a bit of roll dodges and easy breaking free and all that all the time as well. So for 1vx, this way your stamina sustain can be used to be quite flexible, and to get your magical sustain up as well, of course. And then for the maximum magicka enchants, they should be full into maximum magicka. The health will be nice nonetheless. This is partly due to the food, which is bewitched sugar skulls here, but also because of Mighty Tudor and the One Piece trainee both giving some extra maximum health as well. And of course Death Dealer's Feet will then top it to 30k. The skills, very classic MagSorc setup, as I said, Streak, Crystal Fragments, Crushing Shock, Haunting Curse, Endless Fury and Overload. As mentioned, Overload is my main ultimate that I use for damage dealing. I try to avoid having to use the rest ult, so I'd rather play a bit more careful, get my Overload up and then be able to dish out a decent amount of damage to enemy players. It is important when you run Charge to have Crushing Shock as well. It's possible to run something like Elemental Weapon or Crushing Weapon on this build as well. However, then you need to run Sharpened instead of Charged as a front bar weapon trait, because you will not be proccing many status effects with this one source of damage, which is magic damage, compared to the 3 sources of damage: Shock, Flame and Frost damage. Then on the back bar, this is a shield setup, so of course I have the 3 shields here. It's important to cast Hardened Ward and Dampen Magic before Healing Ward, and I have Bound Aegis, which is going to give me a bunch of extra maximum magicka. Bound Aegis is got a small buff in the sense that it now also gives minor protection when you cast it, which reduces your damage taken by 5%. So every now and then, when I'm very comfortable on magicka, I will also cast this, but it is not a buff that I try to keep up all the time. I'm not going to spend magicka when I'm already low on magicka, simply to get a measly 5% damage reduction, which actually translates to a bit less in actual numbers as well. But end of the line is that I don't find it worth making a sacrifice really to try and keep up this buff, so instead I will only cast it when I'm very comfortable on magicka and I know I can cast it now, then maybe get a small benefit from it later if I get pressured a lot. But yeah, for healing options you also have other options than Healing Ward. For example, you have Vigor, but Vigor also gives minor Resolve, which is the same as Bound Aegis here. The healing also I feel is a bit less than Healing Ward, and it costs stamina, and this makes my stamina sustain a bit more difficult. And it's not a shield, and honestly I like playing with shields, so you know, having a maximum magicka build allows me to have a big healing ward as well, and that in its own right is going to give me a lot of healing, more than Vigor or Rapid Regeneration would. You could also slot Crit Surge if you want, and then you can go with Sword and Board on the back bar, which will net you a little bit more maximum magicka and tankiness on the back bar. However, the healing I think takes quite a nerf on that, since you cannot cast Healing Ward, which gives a lot of healing, and this makes it sometimes even more difficult for me to survive, so I do prefer just going with Healing Ward here on the back bar. Then for the champion points, on the blue tree I have Master at Arms, Ironclad, Deadly Aim and Force of Nature. If you're not running Crushing Shock or Charged on your front bar, it's not worth running Force of Nature, and then it's better to switch it out. A good alternative is to slot Arcane Supremacy, for example. This is going to make your shields even tankier, which is nice to have. But alternatively you can also go with Duelist Rebuff. Arcane Supremacy will give you a little bit of damage as well. Duelist Rebuff will be purely a focus into defense. Or alternatively you can also go for Wrathful Strikes. This is simply going to give you a little bit more purely extra damage if that's what you're looking for. And then for the red CP I have Sustained by Suffering, Pain's Refuge, Survival Instinct and Bastion. I do prefer Survival Instincts over Arcane Alacrity now, simply because of the amount of people running Charged in PvP right now, which means that while I'm 1vxing I'm gonna have a status effect on me most of the time, if not all the time, especially if somebody is running Serpent's Disdain as well. So yeah, the Survival Instinct is what I prefer here. But that's it for the build. I will just list some gameplay after this in the video. So for the gameplay I just have a short clip for you guys. As always I will have more Magical Sorcerer clips as the patch progresses, and I'll make sure to put it in the video description as well when it's there. But in any case, this should showcase already pretty nicely what the build does in action. Basically here it's a 1vx situation, I'm trying to pull some EP together, and for Magical Sorcerer it is important to kite, that's what Streak is for, and you're not as tanky, so it becomes even more important. As you can see I saved up a lot of Overload. I've also 500 ult, and I'm using that to quickly take somebody down. The damage increase when you have Overload up is huge. I toggle it off again there to make sure I don't waste any other overload ticks. Then I'll toggle it on again and I press the next guy with it. You can see this is a decay here, who is a little bit more tanky. However, the light attacks from overload hit a lot harder. And now I casted the rest of the ult to secure the kill and to make sure that I don't die straight after and I can finish the 1vx. And then I just use the regular MagSorc toolkit without overload to finish off the rest of the players, which are more squishy than me. The reason, by the way, that overload is so much stronger is because of the light attack nerfs. The normal 5-staff light attacks deal a lot less damage this patch than in the previous patch, and that's why it's become so important for Magical Sorcerer to use overload, not to mention that H&R got nerfed as well. In any case, I just keep pressuring down this last player until he died, and that's an example of a little 1vx that you can do with this build. I hope if you choose to play MagSorc that you will have fun with it, because to be honest it can be difficult these days. I wish you good luck, no matter whether you try a shield and a no shield build. And again, I will upload another build video covering some other builds on MagSorc that I tried out but didn't find really worth presenting as a main build. And next to that, if you wish to support me further, I do also have a Patreon. I do things like one-on-one lessons there, gameplay reviews if you're struggling with MagSorc or another class, and early build previews to what I want to upload next on YouTube. If you would check it out, I would greatly appreciate it. But in any case, I thank you very much for watching this video. Good luck with your MagSorc, and have a good one, guys. See ya.